Hi guys, welcome to Australian Skies. Remember back in 2019 we had the ill-fated Storm Area 51 non-event. Created by Maddie Roberts on June 27th, 2019, this would involve raiding the Area 51 site in Nevada in search of extraterrestrial life. Now, more than 2 million people responded on the event's page, which subsequently attracted widespread media attention. On the day, however, only about 150 people were reported to have shown up at the entrance of Area 51, with none succeeding in entering the base. Now, what if I told you that Australia had their own version of this, a storming of Pine Gap, if you like, but unlike Storm Area 51, this one actually worked. Well, on the night of December the 8th, 2005, 4 protesters, 2 male and 2 female, hiked for many hours through the desert scrub surrounding Pine Gap to demonstrate their opposition to Australia's role in the Iraq War. Calling themselves Christians Against All Terrorism, the 4 protesters set out in the direction of Pine Gap wearing white overalls labelled Citizens Inspection Team. Check this out.
From then on, it's quite a remarkable story because we've got 4 people who have never had any experience at all in breaking into anything. And so we trekked through the Northern Territory scrub, making our way through very thick scrub, pulling trees apart, spin effects everywhere, bumping into houses, electric fences, cattle, and all we could do was follow the glow, the lights of Pine Gap. And it's a very eerie feeling walking through the bush with this glow in front of you. Of course, at any moment, I expected that we would be crash-tackled from behind by some security guy in commando gear, because we did, after all, tell them we were coming. So it's not as if this was a surprise.
And here's where this story takes a strange twist. Prior to arriving in Alice Springs, the protesters contacted Australia's Defence Minister requesting a citizen's inspection of Pine Gap because they believed Pine Gap was involved in suspected terrorist activity. Unsurprisingly, the Defence Minister denied their request, so the group wrote back saying that if they couldn't do their inspection with his permission, they would do it without. They also gave him the date and the time they would do it. Now, obviously, no one took them seriously. No one had ever attempted to break into Pine Gap before. That is until now.
We went to Alice Springs, met up with the local activists, got lots of advice and tips from them, spoke with the Indigenous community in Alice Springs. They gave us permission to enter the land and a blessing on our citizens' inspection. And they did note that no one had ever asked them before permission to build anything or to do anything in the area of Pine Gap. So we got our Citizens Inspection Team uniforms and we went out to the base a few days before to check it out and to make our plans. So we met the head of security, and again, everything we did was open and transparent. We're in the tradition of non-violent direct action, which means we wanted to be open and honest at all times. We basically told them what we planned to do and when.
So why were these protesters so adamant that Pine Gap was guilty of something dodgy?
Pine Gap's been accredited with everything from helping in the downfall of Whitlam, tracking Scud missiles sent off by Iraqi military into Israel, and in the current war on Iraq with actually directing bombs which were bombing Baghdad. Now, you went to Iraq before the war started and were there as a human shield. Can you tell us what you feel about Pine Gap playing that role and yourself being there as an Australian to defend what was the Iraqi people that were being bombed?
Being in Iraq during the war makes the issue of Pine Gap for me a very personal one, and for me the issue is not in any way abstract. There is no loose connection for me. For me it's concrete and it's definite because I was on the receiving end of those missiles whose coordinates were typed in from Pine Gap, and the intelligence gathered for those missiles came from Pine Gap.
Originally, the Australian people had been sold the idea that Pine Gap was a joint space research facility controlling satellites and monitoring missile launches from around the world. Could it be possible that Pine Gap had evolved from being a research site into a military facility directly linked to the battlefield?
Top secret documents obtained by the ABC's background briefing program now provide the first clear proof that this surveillance site is crucial to US military operations in the battlefield. One document, titled NSA Intelligence Relationship with Australia and marked Top Secret, describes the facility, known under the NSA code word Rainfall, as a site which plays a significant role in supporting both intelligence activities and military operations.
These documents show us that Pine Gap is critically not just a part of a strategic intelligence organisation at the national level, the things you might tell the president. These are things that you'll tell the majors and captains in companies and battalions on the ground in operations. This is extraordinarily important for the United States in military terms today.
The base is linked to huge satellites that suck up vast amounts of digital data from electronic sources, including mobile phones, email accounts, and internet connections. Pine Gap looks north and west. The NSA's Menwith Hill base in the UK looks south and east, so that together most of the Earth's landmass is covered. Analysts at Pine Gap can find a target by seeking the signals and location of their communications, like mobile phones, and then firing that information via optical cables to military centres in the US. From there, it can be sent to commanders in the battlefield or to the pilots of the US's expanding fleet of lethal unmanned drones based in Nevada.
Okay, so fair enough. There might be a little bit more to Pine Gap than what we've been led to believe. But what of our 4 brave protesters? What happened to them? Did they get lost in the desert, never to be seen again, or did they achieve what they set out to do?
In the middle of the night, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I started to think to myself when I was falling over so many times over logs and into ditches, you'd have to be crazy. Who do we think we are that we think we're going to make it into a CIA spy base when we're amateurs, we've never done this before? And as I kept walking, I was thinking this, and then the base got closer and closer, and I started to see people walking around inside, and the floodlights are so bright, it's bigger than anything you'd see at the MCG. The floodlights were going in and were going outwards. And then it struck me, no, I'm not crazy. This is crazy. This is the middle of the desert. It's a secret spy base. People are running around at 2 or 3 in the morning doing God knows what. We're not allowed to know. Even members of Australia's Parliament are forbidden to know what goes on at Pine Gap. We continued to move towards the base. Then a security patrol came along, a buggy with a spotlight on the top. We thought we'd been caught, and then we realised as we were crouching down that the buggy didn't see us. We continued walking on, and that surveillance vehicle came another 3 times, and we managed to evade it every time. Eventually the sun rose and the foliage thinned out, the trees were less and less, and eventually we were just walking in open air towards the fence. The other team, which we didn't know what was happening to them, had managed, as we expected, to get there before us. They'd reached the perimeter fence, the inner fence, cut the inner fence, got in deep into the facility, scaled a building, and unfurled some banners and icons, and then took photos of each other giving peace signs. The base was on high alert by the time we got there and were arrested as we were cutting the fence. Pine Gap was shut down, its operations were shut down for about 5 hours. Now, we don't know if that's ever happened before. We were amazed at the success we had in getting into that base.
Long story short, they were captured and were going to be tried under the Defence Special Undertakings Act of 1952, which carries very heavy penalties. In short, the government wanted to set an example with them. Fortunately, the Australian courts went, no, they're just protesters, and threw the case out with a couple of minor fines. They were very, very lucky. Now, regardless of political or religious beliefs, I have to give them credit for having balls of steel, and hopefully it was all worth it. I suppose only time will tell. Thanks for watching episode 2. We'll see you next time for episode 3.